Welcome to the NFL Coast to Coast podcast brought to you by TheLines.com. Coming to you from the West Coast, Josh Lander, joined by Nate Weitzer. He's on the East Coast, and we're kicking off the wild card weekend here on Saturday. We're looking at the two games that we've got player props for both. We've got some from the Pittsburgh Steelers at the Ravens, some from the Chargers and the Texans. So definitely want to subscribe to that page because we're also coming back with more stuff here from the Sunday and Monday games. We'll have those ahead of time for you guys as well, coming out on Friday as well, or Saturday early on. Either way, you're going to get these in time to go ahead and make those picks. So we're pumped, ready for the NFL playoffs here. So let's just jump right into your first player prop for Saturday, Nate.
Yeah, Jaylen Warren over 8.5 rush attempts is even money. You can mess with the yards too, 32.5. Although that it doesn't really have the multiple outs that I think the attempts has, which, this game can go two ways. It's a 10-point spread. Either the Ravens are just clearly superior and they absolutely smack the Steelers team, and then we're in third down back mode the entire game, which makes it a Jaylen Warren game. Or the Steelers are able to kind of impose their will, more like the first meeting, and have a very run-heavy approach, in which case it's still a Jaylen Warren game because he's better than Najee Harris by a good yardstick, and they've kind of figured that out since Week 10. That Christmas game was that was the luckiest cover I've ever had with Najee getting over, because they just decided to feed him in garbage time. He had about 8 opportunities before it was garbage time. It was all Jaylen Warren. And the Steelers, Art Smith trying to figure some stuff out here, which is, a little bit of read option look with Russ, even though he's not really scaring anybody with his legs. But it involves Jaylen. Either way, he is creating another full more yard per touch than Najee, 4.2 versus 3.48. Getting bogged down in the numbers here. Najee's 31st among running backs in yards created. And opponents tend to stack the front when they see Najee under center, right? Because he has a much higher carry rate. They're much more predictable with that. So that's why you like Jaylen, because if they decide that they're in an obvious pass situation early because Lamar has lit them up or whatever, then we're going to see Jaylen in more passing formations, and then you get that inside draw, or you get the rush attempts when the defense doesn't expect it, and therefore you have more success. Because the Ravens are an absolute run funnel that just don't let you do that otherwise. But I think the Steelers will continue to mix it up with Warren. In the last matchup, when it did kind of get away from them, right, he was 67% of the snaps and had 12 for 48. Also, some receiving yards here. I'm not necessarily going to chase that. I think the Steelers do want to shorten this game any way possible. Keep fewer possessions for Lamar. Keep that clock running, try to keep it low scoring like a true AFC North game. So I think we will see him run pretty often, neutral script, negative script, whatever. That's what Pittsburgh's got to do to get back on track.
Yeah, we're of the same mind. I mean, I do like the rush and receive combined around 56.5 or so. I would just take that because, we're saying the same thing, which is usage for Jaylen Warren. And I still think you have outs that he's going to out-snap Najee no matter what the game script is. I mean, that last week was the first week that Najee out-snapped Jaylen in the last 5 weeks of the season that they've been on the field together. So that was a little bit out of the norm, was him coming back. And that really just provided value for this game for Jaylen as well. Interestingly, too, I could easily see this being another 3-score game like the second one, more so than the first one, mostly because of just sort of the weirdness of the first one where Baltimore outgained them by 2 yards per play overall on the in that game. In the first one, they just had all those turnovers. Next game, they limit themselves to that 1 turnover. They're good to go. So I think it's the same situation that they're going to need some fluky stuff to keep this game close as well. And either way, that just spells Jaylen Warren. You don't have Najee out there unless you have that positive game script for Pittsburgh. So let me go ahead and stay in this game and fade the other guy that I guess will be on the field a lot for the offense for the Steelers. That's Russ. I'm going under 208.5 passing yards. Almost feels chalky. honestly, to be like Russell under, and I can understand that, but I also think that like we're at the point in the season basically where I think for Russ, he should kind of be back at where he was when he came out and started for the Steelers, and it was at like 185.5 passing yards. I think that's a little bit more where we've seen from him. I mean, it's basically just turned into a pumpkin, right? Over the course of the last roughly like 4 to 5 weeks, he's gone under 211, or at least in all four of those last four games. Their pass EPA is bad. He has a negative pass EPA overall in the last 9 games. So basically almost every game he started at this point. He's only one of 2 quarterbacks now in the last half of the season to get that negative EPA per play and still be in the playoffs. And that would be alongside CJ Stroud and Houston, who have also been spiraling a bit. Not as bad as this Pittsburgh's team. And for Baltimore, like I really just wanted to point out, and you started pointing it out to me roughly like 4 or 5 weeks ago, that this Baltimore defense, pass defense, wasn't bad, and we'd kind of been giving them a little bit of a break, especially on the outside. Where their corners are graded very highly, like we've been giving them a break with the yards per game, even with the pass EPA being low at first. They're back to number 1 in pass EPA in the last 6 weeks of the season. So anybody dropping back against them does not look good. And obviously we've got the weather as well for Saturday, which looks nasty already. Going to be cold, probably right around cold enough for snow. So we'll see if it's flurries. Either way, it's going to be kind of gross and not fun to play football in necessarily. So I would be leaning towards the rush for them. I don't know that they're going to have enough success on the ground. So it does make you scared that there's a negative game script incoming for Russ, and that he's going to get up above like 22, 25 in that range for the pass attempts. And that would definitely make me nervous, but I still just don't trust in him to be able to get the ball far enough downfield, even with Pickens back, who's going to be just shadowed everywhere and then looking at doubled all over the field when he's on the outside at this point. So yeah, I'm going to stick to the under here for Russ and his pass yards.
Yeah, maybe you fade the completions because what you're saying is, yeah, you don't,
Right.
you
He
don't,
would need some bombs. Yeah.
right. I mean, he's when he's able to throw, it's usually a deep pass, right? I'm trying to find the number here. It's 19 and a half some places, 18 and a half. Yeah, he's not going to dink and dime. That's for sure.
Mm,
Like, even if they are in that kind of prevent defense at the end of the game, the Ravens, I wouldn't necessarily think Russ would be a high
right.
volume guy. So yeah, I could definitely see a world where he doesn't get here. And this, whether the Steelers are in this game or not, like you almost kind of wish that they cover for him to go under, because
Yeah.
if they're down double digits, like it's just like, all right, let loose, yeah,
Yeah.
and throw some bombs. But yeah, tough to do in the playoffs at times. To see where your head's at. Going to the early game here, I'm going to take a sack prop. First time all season here,
I love it.
but you only need half a sack here from Will Anderson Jr., who is among the league leaders in sacks. It's good odds, and I think he can get there for sure. I mean, there is always some variance in terms of like, is he going to push somebody over to the inside and Daniil Hunter gets the sack? But, even if he just gets the half sack, we're there. He has 4.5 sacks in his last 4 at home here. Houston is that number 2 sack rate at home on the season. He's a big reason why. And the last 2 matchups for them at home, Lamar Jackson and Tua, who gets the ball out in about 0.3 seconds. So those are extremely tough dudes to sack. Very impressive to get that. The Chargers are not a tough team to get a sack against. They allow the 7th highest sack rate on the road. Their last 2 road games were against the Raiders without Crosby, which is to say no pass rush, and the New England Patriots since fired their coach. Previous 3 road games, Justin Herbert took 14 sacks. He took 20 if you include the last 5. These teams are just like living in the backfield against Herbert, and he's kind of like fallen in love with his legs a little bit. I mean, I guess out of necessity because the pocket is collapsing, but I think he thinks he's maybe a more athletic scrambler than he is to a degree when you face like these truly elite defensive lines like Houston has. They can probably catch him if he thinks he's going to get out of there and just pick up the sack that way. Anderson, does a really good job setting the edge and then diving in to potentially get one there. So, yeah, I think people may be sleeping on the Texans a little bit too much. I mean, their defense at least is going to come fired up here, knowing that they're home dogs here, and I think they're gonna definitely get to Herbert.
Yeah, no, I like the look a lot. I think this is a good moment in time. Everything you're talking about, and yeah, that offensive line still suspect in the pass game, but Let me go to the double fade, back to the later game here with Fryer Muth. I don't know that they're going to get the Muth Luth on this one, so I'm going under 4.5 receptions, which has gotten bet down for sure a bit at this point. It was definitely a lot nicer, looking at about minus 120. I think you're looking closer to minus 130 or 40, but definitely shop that line around. And I would still be taking this. I still think this is not really. There's a couple things working in our favor. Pickens is back. We know that. I do really like the pivot that you suggested for the Russell Wilson for under completions versus under yards, because I agree that he's going to be looking downfield as much as possible and to the outside as much as anything. And with Pickens in there, when Wilson has been under center this season, there's been 8 games that the three of them have been played together, and he's under in 5 of 8. The 3 overs twice versus Cincinnati, worst team versus tight ends in the league, and then versus KC, 4th worst in the league versus tight ends, allowing receptions and yards for those guys. So pretty explainable there. Now for Baltimore, it's not like they were awesome this season against tight ends either. They're also in the bottom half of the league limiting that stuff. But they're definitely better than these teams. And like I was telling you, the pass EPA on defense for this Baltimore team that's been so good for the last 6 weeks has also contributed to limiting tight ends, and has now also limited them in the last 6 games, 6th best, limiting the reception specifically to them. And you look at Muth versus this squad over the course of the last couple seasons, definitely has not had a ton of success against Baltimore. They are a 16. Let me start over here. He's only had 7 catches in the last 3 games that he's played against them since last season. So let's just start there. A big part of that is the amount of man coverage that this Baltimore defense has been running. And he has a 16%, there we go, win rate versus man coverage on the season, as opposed to a roughly 22% win rate versus zone coverage. So definitely has shown that propensity to get it. And for Russ too, against the zone, we've seen that's his way of beating it this season, is the high ADOT and the stuff down the sidelines, trying to get past the safeties. So I just don't think there's 5 receptions in there for Freiermuth, because I don't think there's the 19, 20 completions for Russ going to happen in this game.
Yeah, the same game theory, I guess, is what we're saying. Is we don't see him dinking and diming or hitting him down the seam pretty consistently against this defense. Don't really think that that's the Steelers' main game plan here. I mean, they might have Freiermuth in there a lot to block, hoping that they can again be ground heavy, have some success there, and shorten the game, keep it close. I mean, interesting to think about Pickens if you are kind of pumping him up by fading Freiermuth, is what you're
Yeah.
suggesting, and you can get serious plus money on him getting 5 receptions,
Mm.
or plus 150, and just assuming that he's going to drop everything like he did last time out, that would be foolish. I mean, he's clearly their most talented receiver. They had a little hiccup getting back on track, him and Russ. So maybe looking at longest reception or receptions for Pickens to just have some explosive plays, keep this thing interesting, because I don't think you can just expect the Steelers to lay down here. That's just not the way this rivalry has gone. But speaking of longest reception, I like Isaiah Likely for 15.5 on his longest reception. And basically the same bet is to get 27.5 yards. Although, I mean, maybe he just catches one ball for 20. That's the kind of guy he is. He is the go-to guy on broken plays, basically, for Lamar Jackson, especially with Zay Flowers out. I don't really expect Zay to go here. I mean, I thought he tore his ACL off the bat there. He was non-contact and just crumpled up.
Right.
Good to see that he's going to be able to play, I think, if they get out of this round, but I don't think he's going to play in week 1. And the last 4, anyway, I mean, Ravens have been playing a lot of 2 tight end sets, likely 70% of the snaps, 60% of the routes. And the difference is Mark Andrews is your classic inline tight end. Likely is a move tight end, meaning he will be in the slot. He will be out on the routes a lot more often. And those kind of guys have just killed the Steelers. I mean, Kelsey and Gesicki, both 8 catches in their last one out. 18 and 20 yards on the longest. Njoku grabbed 7 of 13 targets. I mean, overall, they're allowing the second most receptions to tight ends at 9 yards per reception, and Likely in his 3 against Pittsburgh, 15 yards per reception, 45 yards a game. He just, can find the gaps in this single high man coverage that the Steelers play all the time. They are extremely vulnerable to the top outside receiver, and if Zay Flowers isn't playing, then who is that really? I mean, Bateman, Tylan Wallace, these guys, they are bodies on the outside, but honestly, I think Lamar is probably looking at Likely, who was a wide receiver back in high school. I actually did cover him at Everett High. Remember that? And him and Mike Sam were still on the same team. Mikey going on Sunday with the Commandos, but yeah, I digress. Likely here for 28 yards.
Yeah. No, I'm good with that. That's really low. I agree. Once you have Zay out, this is where you look like bubble screens, even, all the short stuff that you would set up for Zay for the yak. Like this is maybe their best yak guy on the squad, including Zay. So yeah, I'm with you on this one. I think this is a great look too. I would have gone here if you had not, but we're aligned there. I'm going to go with Nico Collins to close it out. And it's a lot, but it's plus money for over 6.5 receptions. And who are you going to throw to, CJ, if it's not Nico at this point? Even John Mechie right now, DNP, it does look like he's going to be a go, but he didn't practice on Tuesday. We're recording this on Thursday. I believe he was a partial participant on Wednesday, and I didn't look at what happened today. I just know that's not good for a dude who has a history at this point, and is a little guy, really fast guy. But if you catch him, he's going to pay the price when he lands, and that's been the case for him. So there's just really limited options at this point. And I think if CJ is going to go anywhere past 5 yards, like what we've seen from Dalton Schultz all season, then he's going to need to find Nico Collins, and they can double him. But this has got to be a top 5 wide receiver in the league who was vying for basically all the stuff that Jamar Chase did this year. Kind of thought Nico would have that year if he stayed healthy with the triple crown look there. But for him, it comes down to just also being the favorite target, getting double-digit targets when there were other guys on the field. Why would that not be the case now? It's probably going to be like a CeeDee Lamb style 15-target look for him. I would not be the least bit surprised if they can at least stay on the field long enough to get him that many looks. But if you look at 6 of the 12 games this year, he's had 8+ targets. There's really strong understanding for why he didn't get double digits or 8 at least in almost all of the other games, including last week when he didn't need to play. Still had 5 receptions on 5 targets on the one drive. I think it was just one drive that he did that because they didn't need that game against the Titans. So obviously most of their starters didn't play, and he caught those balls from Davis Mills in that one. But just another example of what he's capable of. Then you've got a couple of games where he got hurt against Buffalo week 5. Then he has to work his way back a month later or 5 weeks later when he actually comes back. Starts out with about 7 targets, then 8, goes up to 10, gets 11. Then has a couple bad games as well. DC against KC, which was a complete debacle in that Chiefs game, and then same concept for that other debacle in the Baltimore game where you only had the 5 targets and that offense was barely on the field, and it just didn't matter. So at this point, like, it's Deontay Johnson who has even played. I don't think he's played with CJ yet, right? The disgruntled guy coming out of Baltimore at this point, who couldn't even last after the trade on the squad. So there's just not much out there. It's just going to be force feeding it to him. I think at the end of the day, if they're not able to get anything down the field working, they're just going to force feed him to get him at least touches so that he can try to build up some yards after catch, which is why I went for the plus money on the receptions.
Yeah, I see you're going with the receptions rather than the yards because his ADOT has just plummeted lately
Right.
because teams are not, they're playing the safety on his side. There's nobody else to respect. Like that's the concern. Although like Chargers do kind of just play a soft zone. I think the receptions are a better bet here. He can kind of just like get in the gap there and pick some up. If you get into a negative game script, that would definitely work. If it's a positive game script, Joe Mixon's probably going to eat because the Chargers will let you rack up yards and then try to stop you in the red zone. So those are the two guys, though. Like the Texans, like you laying out, like they don't have any skill players other than that, and I don't really trust CJ to make big plays down the field anymore. So receptions over yards, I guess I approve with that.
Yeah. Joe Mixon, another guy who's just going to be out there the whole time. Damian Pierce got pretty much every snap last week with Mixon being able to sit as well, which is huge for a guy like him. So I expect at least a lot of volume here, but we know that what this Chargers defense is capable at the same time. So it does feel like we're most people, like most people, leaning that the Chargers are going to walk away with the victory here, the way things look for the Texans. But we'll see. Either way, that's all the time we have on the Saturday games here. Definitely make sure to subscribe to that page. We're going to have up the Sunday and Monday's games in one episode for you guys, so we can make sure to give you enough time to bet on those as well. So until we see you next, happy betting.